The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, friends. Welcome to this 15th webinar on the Secret Teachings of All Ages by Manly P. Hall. This webinar series is available on makara.us under the subheadings Moria Federation webinars, then webinar series in progress as shown here. Both this and the SD series are also now available on YouTube. Just do a search for Francis Donald Secret Teachings or Secret Doctrine. By the way, if I suddenly disappear, it means I've lost my internet connection. If you can, give me 5 minutes to get back on. Occasionally we have just a second power outage. Thankfully, it's never happened yet in all the years that BL and I have been doing this, but it's always a possibility. In the meantime, Michael and BL will thrill you with the ancient wisdom teachings. So today we'll continue our study of the Odinic Mysteries. Last month we discovered that there are many parallels between Norse mythology and theosophical concepts like Hinunga gap, the primordial void from which all form arises, and the world tree called in Norse mythology Yggdrasil. As a further illustration of the connection between theosophy and the Odinic Mysteries, we have, as explored in the Secret Doctrine series, the 1 of Adi Sanat and the 1 and 9 of Svavavat, representing the first but still unmanifest deity, and as 9, that same deity holding within itself the potential for all diversity. In Norse thought, the equivalent of Adi Sanat is Alfadir, which means all father, Alfadir. Exoterically, just another name for Uden, but esoterically, Alfadir is Svavavat, the 1 and 9, a distinction here pointed out by Albert Pike, who says over Udan and Thor was the great Scandinavian deity Alfadir. Hinungagap, representing the North concept of Prakriti, is equivalent to the Arupa, formless square in the Secret Doctrine, the homogeneous, unmanifest mother aspect from which emerges the 9 worlds arrayed along the axes of Yggdrasil, the tree of life. Yggdrasil also represents the Earth's 2 poles, with the deep roots of Yggdrasil representing the negatively polarized South Pole and the high branches, the positive North Pole. Could we start off this session with a reader of the Secret Doctrine quote on the 2 poles?
Joe, can you read that for us, please?
Yes. The 2 poles are said to be the storehouses, the receptacles and liberators, at the same time, of cosmic and terrestrial vitality, electricity, from the surplus of which the Earth, had it not been for these 2 natural safety valves, would have been rent to pieces long ago. Meru, the abode of the gods, was placed, as before explained, in the North Pole, while Patara, the nether region, was supposed to lie in the south. As each symbol in esoteric philosophy has 7 keys, geographically, Meru and Patala have one significance and represent localities, while astronomically, they have another and mean the 2 poles, which meanings ended by their being often rendered in exoteric sectarianism, the mountain and the pit, or heaven and hell.
Thank you. Any thoughts or questions about this quote? According to Daniel McCoy, author of The Viking Spirit, the first element in Yggdrasil's name, Ygr, which means terrible or fury, is one of Udin's names and indicates how powerful and fearsome the Vikings perceived him to be. The second element, Drasil, means horse. So Yggdrasil means Udin on his horse. If we consider Udin to be the life principle itself, this theosophical Udi Sanat, then the horse, as it does in the sign Sagittarius, represents the form aspect. So we have Udin on his horse, spirit matter, father, mother, and the axial two poles of the Yggdrasil tree, all representing the duality of spirit and form. Now you'll notice that Udin's horse, named Sleipnir, has 8 legs, making him the only horse able to travel throughout the 9 Nordic worlds. 8 plus the 1 of Sleipnir himself makes 9. Thus, Udin riding Sleipnir gives us the 1 and 9 of both Yggdrasil and the theosophical Svabhava. Here's a more bucolic version of Udin on horseback, which also depicts his 2 pet wolves, Geiri and Freki. And here we have the 9th century Tjandvidje stone, one of the oldest surviving depictions of Odin and Sleipnir, which is similar to this Ardra stone image. Okay, back to the text. Last month, we began an in-depth study of Yggdrasil based on MPH's text, which describes this image by J.A. Knapp. So let's continue where we left off last month. The 3 roots described here represent spirit as sacred and matter as evil. With humanity, spirit in form at the midway point in Midgård, suspended between and subject to the influence of the 2 poles. Tolkien almost certainly lifted the concept of Middle-earth from the Norse Midgård. These 3 roots are watered by 3 wells, which are the sources of the 3 principles, spirit, soul, and matter. Could we get a reader for this passage from the Poetic Edda?
Carrie, can you read that for us, please? There you go.
Sure. The throned figure of Just as High tells Gangleri, King Gylfi in disguise, about Yggdrasil and its roots. Just as High describes 3 roots that support Yggdrasil that stretch a great distance. The 3rd root is located among the Aesir, extends to heaven, and beneath it is the very holy Urdabrunner. Every day the gods ride over the bridge Bifrost to hold court at the well. Just as High says that there are many beautiful places in heaven, and everywhere there is divine protection around it. There a beautiful hall stands under the ash, Yggdrasil, near the well, Urdabrunner, and from this hall come 3 maidens, whose names are Urthor, Verdandi, and Skuld. The maidens shape the lives of men, and we call them Norns. The Norns that dwell by Urdabrunner take water from the well and mud that lies around it, and pour it over the Yggdrasil so that its branches do not decay or rot. The water is described as so holy that anything that enters the well will become as white as the membrane that lies round the inside of the eggshell.
Thanks, Carrie. So Midgård is the source of the terrestrial root, which is watered by Mimir's well. Mim, the root of the word Mimir, means to think, recall, reflect. Thus, Mimir's well suggests the source of mind, Menes, Manas, and Minos. The myth that sold me on the Odinic Mysteries is the story of Udin giving one of his eyes in order to drink from Mimir's well. I know it all, Uden, where you hid your eye within Mimir's well, much famed. Mimir drinks mead every morning from Val Father's pledge. Would you know more, or what? So, what is the esoteric significance of the sacrifice of Uden's eye? Microcosmically, it might represent exchanging outer for inner sight or vision by literally making one's eye single. This is a Taurian reference that further links Uden to Buddha. Macrocosmically, Uden's remaining now single eye is the solar eye, the eye of Shiva, also represented by the Falcon Vedfonir, which we'll read about in a minute. In Norse mythology, Mimir was a wise man who, quote, helped the gods retain their ancestral wisdom. He was beheaded during a war between the two tribes of gods. Upon seeing the severed head, Uden embalmed it with special herbs and chanted magical songs over it in order to preserve it. He consulted the head in times of need, and it continued to dispense incomparable advice. See, I'll read this real quickly. Upon seeing the severed head, Odin embalmed it with special herbs and chanted magical songs over it to preserve it. Well, I read this actually in my text. So any thoughts or questions? Here's the about this concept. Here's the, can we get a reader for this quote from the Secret Doctrine on Mimir's well?
Michael, can you read that for us, please?
Thus, Odin got his wisdom, power, and knowledge by sitting at the feet of Mimir, the thrice-wise Jotun, who passed his life by the fountain of primeval wisdom, the crystalline waters of which increased his knowledge daily. Mimir drew the highest knowledge from the fountain, because the world was born of water. Hence, primeval wisdom was to be found in that mysterious element. The eye which Odin had to pledge to acquire that knowledge may be the sun, which enlightens and penetrates all things. His other eye being the moon, whose reflection gazes out of the deep, and which at last, when setting, sinks into the ocean. But it is something more besides this. Loki, the fire god, is said to have hidden in the water, as well as in the moon, the light giver, whose reflection he found therein. And this belief that the fire finds refuge in the water was not limited to the old Scandinavians.
Thanks, Michael. So any thoughts or questions about this esoteric quote from the Secret Doctrine? This is where we get deeper insight into these mysteries.
Francis?
Yeah.
Aunt Veronica says they say that the water has memory.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, there's a strong connection between those concepts. The Akashic records are kept on the second subplane, and the two is always related to water. You could say the very highest form of water would be Akashic, right? Anyone else? So there's some information here that HPB actually got from Asgard and the Gods. This is a beautifully illustrated book, oft quoted by HPB, and the source of one of the most popular versions of the world tree shown here, the Yggdrasil ash. So And here's a 10th century picture stone of the Utan Hirokin. Same group as is shown here with Mimir. So Mimir and this Hirokin were both Jotuns. Or let's see, it's actually pronounced Utun, I believe, in Scandinavia. In the passage that we just read, shown here that I brought forward, HPB names Mimir a thrice-wise Utun, a Nordic version of the thrice-wise, or Trismegistus, Hermes. Utun is also the name for a single giant, but since Mimir is clearly not an agent of chaos, there must be a distinction as well as a connection between the giants and this class or group or race of wise magicians, made supernatural through their wisdom and magical prowess, hinted at by the fact that the Utun illustrated on this picture stone uses serpents as reins. Serpents being the universal metaphor for wisdom, reins a metaphor for control. And is that yet another serpent with the tail forming the top of Hirokin's head and the serpent's head extending out of Hirokin's mouth? What an ingenious way to depict not only magical speech, but a complete identification with serpent power. Okay, the third well, called Hvergelmir, is the source of rivers and the home of many serpents, including Nidhugg, who continuously gnaws the roots of Yggdrasil, as you can see here. The Hvergelmir receives a single mention in the Poetic Edda, found in the poem Grímnismal. Eikthynir, the heart is called, that stands o'er Udan's hall, and bites from Leired's branches. From his horns fall drops into Hvergelmir, whence all waters rise. Whence all waters rise identifies Niflheim, the abode of the dead, as the source of the purely material realm. At the opposite end of the spectrum, we have Asgård, home of the Asir, atop the sacred mountain. Esoterically, Asgård is Shambhala, and the sacred mountain is Meru, or Carney Peak, or Uluru, or wherever the center of the world is deemed to be. Could we get a reader for this quote from the SD?
Karen, can you read that for us, please? You're self-muted. There you go.
As Meru is the abode of the gods, these were said to ascend and descend periodically, by which astronomically the zodiacal gods were met, the passing of the original North Pole to the earth to the South Pole of the heaven. It is the North Pole, the country of Meru, which is the seventh division, as it answers to the seventh principle of the occult calculation, for it represents the region of Atma, of pure soul and spirituality. And I just wanted to comment, Francis, that some of the pictures you showed in the very beginning were really beautiful.
Oh, good.
Yeah, many beautiful pictures.
Great, thank you. Yeah, it's such a rich mythology. There's so much more material available for this particular mystery school than many that we've studied. So it's been a delight to put it together just for that reason. Okay. So in Norse thought, the Aesir are the powers that hold the cosmos together and prevent the giants, the embodiment of chaos, from succeeding in their attempt to drag it back into formlessness. That's the primordial theme in Norse mythology, is these two warring powers between civilization and chaos. Next, the three branches that support Midgård. It could be metaphors for the three worlds of human endeavor, the mental, astral, and physical planes, since they hold up, Middle Earth or Midgård. In the Great Sea, hang on a sec. Living in its branches is Eikthenird, which we just mentioned, and also a goat named Heidrun, pictured here. Could we get a reader for this poem from the Poetic Edda?
I'll try and read it, except I'm not so sure I can pronounce that one word, but I'll give it a try. Okay.
Heidrun in Leirad.
Okay, thank you. Heidrun, the goat, is called. That stands Odin's, I'm saying it wrong, Erdin's hall, and bits from Laired's branches. He a bowl shall fill with the bright mead, that drink shall never fail.
Thanks, Biel. Yeah, so and of course this mead was an elixir, kind of like the soma of in Indian lore, that the drinking of it brought vision and enlightenment, right? So he's up in the highest branches there. It's fascinating stuff. Let's see if we go back a couple of pictures, you'll see him. I'm always surprised how far you have to go back. Yeah, you see him there to the right. Not highlighted there in the bottom right corner. Okay. So in the great branches surrounding the earth is Jormungand, pictured here. You can see that the serpent going. The Midgård snake with its tail in its mouth. According to the Prose Edda, Odin took the shapeshifter god Loki's three children by the giantess Angrboda. They're the wolf Fenrir, Hel, queen of the underworld, and the serpent Jormungand. He then threw Jormungand into the great ocean that circles Midgård. The serpent grew so large that it was able to surround the earth and grasp its own tail. As a result, it received the name of Midgård serpent or world serpent. Jormungand, whose archenemy is the thunder god Thor, is obviously a form of the Ouroboros. Macrocosmically, the sea surrounding the earth is space, and when Odin cast Jormungand into the sea, cyclic time began. The Prose Edda also says that when Jormungand lets go of its tail, thus ending cyclic time, the battle called Ragnarok, a metaphor for Pralaya, will begin. Okay. Microcosmically, Bifrost, not Bifrost like it looks, but Bifrost, can be seen as a metaphor for the rainbow bridge, the antikarana between Midgård, the personality, and Asgård, the soul. Macrocosmically, Bifrost represents the Earth's cyclic passage through the zodiac as described in A Secret Doctrine, a second volume. Maybe Michael could read this if you're on, since it's so short, Michael. Or Biel. Oh,
As
there you go.
Meru is the high abode of the Scandinavian gods, these were said to ascend and descend periodically, by which astronomically the zodiacal gods were meant, the passing of the original North Pole of the Earth to the South Pole of the heaven.
Thanks, Michael.
Beautiful picture there, too.
Thank you. In Isis Unveiled, HPB suggests that Bifrost is a metaphor for etheric substance. Could we get a reader for this passage?
Yes, Lynn, can you read that for us, please?
May we not regard ether or the medium as not merely a bridge between one order of things and another, forming as it were a species of cement, in virtue of which the various orders of the universe are welded together and made into one. Several thousand years ago, do you want me to read that?
Yes.
Several thousand years ago, the idea of a bridge between the visible and the invisible universes was allegorized by ignorant heathen in the Edda song of Voluspa, the vision of Vala, the seeress. For what is this bridge of Bifrost, the radiant rainbow, which leads the gods to their rendezvous near the Urdur fountain? But the same idea is that which is offered to the thoughtful student by the authors of the unseen universe.
Thanks, Lynn. So, once you've accustomed yourself to HPB's style, you know that she was being derisive when she says allegorized by ignorant heathen, suggesting that they are anything but, right? Okay. So it's pretty clear that Nordic mythology provides ample evidence for the existence of a profound, though now withdrawn, occult mystery school. This is an opinion also held by HPB, as described in this extended passage from Isis Unveiled. Could we get a reader, please?
Scott, can you read that for us, please? You're self-muted. There you
Give
go.
him a minute.
There you go. You should be able to speak now.
There we go. How about that?
Here we go.
How far more poetical and how much greater the religious spirit to be found in the heathen Norse legends of creation. In the boundless abyss of the mundane pit, the
Ginnungagap. It's actually Hinungagap.
Of course, why would it be pronounced with a G if it's an H? H with a G, I don't know. Okay, where rage in blind fury and conflict, cosmic matter, and the primordial forces, suddenly blows the thaw wind. It is the unrevealed God who sends his beneficent breath from Muspelheim, the sphere of imperial fire, within whose glowing rays dwells this great being, far beyond the limits of the world of matter. And the animus of the unseen, the spirit brooding over the dark, abysmal waters, calls forth out of chaos, and once having given the impulse to all creation, the first cause retires and remains forevermore in statu obscundito.
Thanks, Scott. So another reader, please. This is a continuous from Isis Unveiled, a continuous quote that I've divided.
Yvonne, can you read that for us, please? You're self-muted. There you go.
Okay. There is both religion and science in these Scandinavian songs of heathendom. As an example of the latter, take the conception of Thor, the son of Odin. Whenever this Hercules of the north would grasp the handle of his terrible weapon, the thunderbolt or electric hammer, he is obliged to put on his iron gauntlets. He also wears a magical belt known as the girdle of strength, which, whenever girded about his person, greatly augments his celestial power. He rides upon a car drawn by 2 rams with silver bridles, and his awful brow is encircled by a wreath of stars. His chariot has a pointed iron pole, and the spark-scattering wheels continually roll over rumbling thunderclouds. He hurls his hammer with resistless force against the rebellious frost giants, whom he dissolves and annihilates.
Thank you. Okay. I'll read this, it's so short. When he repairs to the Udar fountain, where the gods meet in conclave to decide the destinies of humanity, he alone goes on foot, the rest of the deities being mounted. He walks for fear that in crossing Bifrot, the rainbow, the many-hued Aesir bridge, he might set it on fire with his thunder car, at the same time causing the Udar waters to boil. And reader, please.
Okay, Martha S., can you read that for us, please? You're self-muted. There
Sure.
you go.
Thanks. Rendered into plain English, how can this myth be interpreted but as showing that the Norse legend makers were thoroughly acquainted with electricity? Thor, the euphemization of electricity, handles his peculiar element only when protected by gloves of iron, which is its natural conductor. His belt of strength is a closed circuit around which the isolated current is compelled to run instead of diffusing itself through space. When he rushes with his car through the clouds, he is electricity in its active condition, as the sparks scattering from his wheels and the rumbling thunder of the clouds testify. The pointed iron pole of the chariot is suggestive of the lightning rod. The two rams, which serve as his coursers, are the familiar ancient symbols of the male or generative power. Their silver bridles typify the female principle, for silver is the metal of Luna, Astarte, Diana. Therefore, in the ram and his bridle, we see combined the active and passive principles of nature in opposition, one rushing forward and the other restraining, while both are in subordination to the world-permeating electrical principle, which gives them their impulse.
Thank you, Martha. And one last one.
Okay, the other Martha. Martha G., can you read that for us, please? You're self-muted.
Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
With the electricity supplying the impulse and the male and female principle combining and recombining in endless correlation, the result is evolution of visible nature, the crown glory of which is the planetary system, which in the mythic Thor is allegorized by the circlet of glittering orbs which bedeck his brow. When in his active condition, his awful thunderbolts destroy everything, even the lesser other titanic forces. But he goes afoot over the rainbow bridge, Bifrost, because to mingle with other less powerful gods than himself, he is obliged to be in a latent state, which he could not be in his car. Otherwise, he would set on fire and annihilate all. The meaning of the Udar fountain that Thor is afraid to make boil and the cause of his reluctance will only be comprehended by our physicists when the reciprocal electromagnetic relations of the innumerable members of the planetary system, now just suspected, shall be thoroughly determined.
Thank you, Martha. Nobody takes you further out than HPB. It's you just long for a book on the Norse myths, you know, where she thoroughly and completely explores this system in her in an inimitable way. And while she's at it, she might as well explore all the rest of the myths too, because there's really some keys in her writings that you just don't find elsewhere. So, any thoughts or questions on this this passage? Primarily on Thor, but also on Hinungagap. We can learn two things from this passage from Isis Unveiled. First, the specific and fabulous information about Thor, and second, how much is veiled by these outer stories. Hopefully with a little coaching from DK, HPB, and others, we can develop the habit and skills to look deeper as we consider the myths and metaphors presented. Many academic mythologists, archaeologists, Egyptologists, and theologians are never trained to look for the wisdom teachings that stand right before their eyes. They'll spend a whole career in their field and never even suspect that they're sitting on a treasure trove of esoteric information. It's extraordinary.
Francis?
Yeah.
Lynn wants to know, is Thor related to Uranus?
Yes. I think definitely. You can see him. It's just where do you place him? He's the intermediary. He's the great intermediary between spirit and matter from one point of view, right? Between Udan, or, more esoterically, Alfadir, and his wife, Frigga, or Freya, depending on, which culture you look at, which is the matter incarnate. So he's, in a sense, he's the firstborn, right? Which also relates to Uranus, who is the last synthesizing planet, which also makes him the first. And, you have that first and seventh ray thing going too. So I think there's, and not to mention the obvious, which is the potent electrical nature of both. But I welcome any astrologers, esoteric astrologers, who comment on this relationship. It's, fascinating idea.
Yeah, there's several correspondences that relate the two, just as you said. Okay, can we go back to the blue picture with the stars in the background? I want to,
Okay.
yeah, it's 2 or 3 more back.
All right, hang on a sec. Let me find it this way. It's easier. This one way back here?
This 47.
47.
Uh-huh.
Oh, this one. Okay.
Yeah.
That
What I want to point out, the phrase that was just in that other one, this between the sun and the moon, or between the moon and the moon, or whatever it is, up there in the top rightish corner, that grouping of 7 stars. You know what that reminds me of? That reminds me of the schemes.
Of the what?
The schemes, the planetary schemes.
Oh, right.
And when we're talking about, there may be the relationship between Thor and Uranus, I'm thinking, maybe the Uranus scheme or something. But that grouping is very distinct.
Yeah,
in this otherwise random,
yeah.
star
Right. There's
pattern.
no question. This is 6 around 1, and that's also the Pleiades, the idea of the 6 around 1, which is the source of the, well, there's a lot to be said about that, but so it could be that, it could be a representation of the scheme plan in general. That's possible. I think it's just beautiful. I think it is sun and moon. I don't think this is full moon and crescent, but can't say for sure. Like you say, you can't say for sure. Yeah.
Okay. And then Anne Veronica says, I was just thinking that the zodiac is the heart in the head of the one about whom not may be said.
Yeah, it appears what I remember is it appears in the head center. Does anybody remember better? I think I remember that little piece of information that DK gives us really expanded my understanding of the one about whom not may be said in terms of his scope, because if it includes, those 12, then in its head center, that it is certainly a being with enormous scope. Anything else before we go back?
Yes. Nicholas says Thor can be identified with Jupiter.
Oh, well, that's true, especially the mythic Jupiter. You know, the Jupiter of, for instance, Greek mythology, right? So there's definitely, I think, really both. You know, Zeus with his lightning um, is also a reference. You know, with his lightning bolts. You know, there's definitely a direct correlation there. You know. Okay, let's see. I'm going to go back here and then back to here, and we're back on track. Anyone else have any thoughts about this? Really fabulous information. Hope it stimulates you to think more metaphorically about these, you know, this mythology. It's really, I think it's a full system, you know, that is yet to be comprehensively interpreted, but we're poking a few holes in it here. So that's a start. After all, this Secret Teachings is a survey course, a 7-year plus survey course. And this is just part of the survey. It's, you know, for further exploration, right? Okay, so here we
and then Carrie says, is not Thor Vulcan?
Yeah, let me think. Well, of course, there's many connections that you can make. I would need to be more familiar with because there is a forge god in the Norse mythology. I just can't pull it up to who it is. There was someone who, you know, forges weapons, etc. And I think that would be more related to Vulcan, but certainly there's similarities, right? Anyone else? Here's a statue of Thor with his iron gauntlets, electricity grounding belt, and a shield that suggests the Fohatic source of lightning. The sculpture, found recently in Turkey, is advertised as being 1,200 years old. I don't buy it. It seems way too naturalistic compared to other sculptures from that time to be that old. But whatever its age, it's a great example of Thor as Fohat, though he should be carrying a hammer, not that axe, but we'll forgive him. Next up, we have a description of the falcon, Vedfónir, mentioned above, who sits between the eyes of the eagle. Isn't that provocative? And sees all things that take place in the universe. What a great metaphor for the planetary Ajna center, and possibly, as before mentioned, a metaphorical embodiment of Udin's single eye. Could we get a reader from this DK quote?
Yes, let me see here. Joe, can you read that for us, please?
One of the 4 Lepika lords, who stand nearest to our planetary logos, is called the living serpent, and his emblem is a serpent of blue with one eye in the form of a ruby in its head. Students who care to carry the symbology a little further can connect this idea with the eye of Shiva, which sees and knows all and records all, as does the human eye in lesser degree.
Okay, there's only one other detail mentioned in the Edda about the falcon Vedfónir, which involves both Ratatosk, the squirrel, and Nidhugg, the serpent. The text tells us, quote, Ratatosk, the squirrel, is the embodiment of the spirit of gossip, and running back and forth between the eagle above and Nidhugg, the serpent below, seeks to stir up discord between them. So, you know, obviously very esoteric understanding, but charming nonetheless. This passage from the Grimnishmal states, Ratatosk is the squirrel named, who has run in Yggdrasil's ash. He from above the eagle's words must carry, and beneath the Nidhogg repeat. The Edda also tells us that when Ratatosk relays his message from Nidhogg, the falcon Vedfolnir flaps his wings furiously, causing a great wind to howl through the upper branches of Yggdrasil. In light of HPB's description of Thor as director of electrical force, we might hypothesize that the flapping of the falcon Vedfolnir's wings is a demonstration of the positive electrical charge of the upper pole of the world axis, whose negative pole is the serpent Nidhogg, and that the passage of the electrical charge from one pole to the another is carried out by, guess who? Ratatosk the squirrel, a process not dissimilar to the flow of energy represented by the winged caduceus. You'll note.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
And Veronica, funny that you should mention the caduceus, and Veronica says Mercury.
Yeah, exactly. The dual quality of Mercury, right? The messenger,
and the messenger,
of the god.
right?
Exactly. Sorry, I beat you to it. Yes, you'll notice that both systems have, they have so much in common, really, but both systems have crowning eagles and two serpents involved, right? And they both move from the below to the above. They both have this axial core, very much connected. So yeah, always thoughts or questions. Don't wait for me to ask it. You're welcome to just jump in anytime if you have a comment. So next from the text we have Nidhogg, the lower serpent, which embodies the principle of decay and death in the material world, as described in this excerpt from the first volume of Secret Doctrine. Could we get a reader, please?
Yes.
You can see Nidhogg down there, really entwined in the roots.
And Veronica,
can you hear me?
Sorry.
Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
You just changed these forms were cosmic and astronomical. Do I start from there?
Yes, please.
These forms were cosmic and astronomical, theist and pantheist, abstract and concrete. They became in turn the polar dragon and the southern cross, the alpha draconis of the pyramid, and the Hindu-Buddhist dragon, which ever threatens yet never swallows the sun during its eclipse. Till then, the tree remains evergreen, for it was sprinkled by the waters of life. The great dragon, ever divine, so long as it was kept within the precincts of the sidereal fields. But the tree grew, and its lower boughs touched at the last the infernal regions, our earth. Then the great serpent Nidhogg, he who devours the corpses of the evil doer in the hole of misery, human life, so soon as they were plunged into Hiverglimir, the roaring cauldron of human passion, gnawed the world tree. The worms of materiality covered the one healthy and mighty roots, and are now ascending higher and higher along the trunk, while the Midgard snake, coiled at the bottom of the seas, encircles the earth, and through its venomous breath makes her powerless to defend herself.
Thank you.
And may I say something?
Yes, of course.
Something's just popped in my mind. When it's Christmas, we say that these they are like dwarfs. We have a special name for them. They come out at the end of the year, and they start sowing the tree of life, trying to bring it down. But then the change of the year comes, and they never are able to do it. But it's in our folklore that at least when people years ago, they were very careful, because these little elephants, I don't know how to translate them, would come up and do all this mischief, but they were never able to gnaw at the tree and take it down.
What country are you in?
Yeah. Greece.
Oh, yeah, in Greece, yeah. Yeah, Greece, it seems to me that Greece has been able to hold on to so much of the, ancient wisdom through its mythology that, a lot of us have lost. But yeah, that's fascinating. It's so connected to this concept, isn't it? Those beings who work to, well, really they're the agents of time and change in the material world, right? They gnaw on the roots, because that's what happens in the material realm. In this quote, she says, "But the tree grew, and its lower boughs touched at last the infernal regions, our earth." Before that, there is no way that a serpent like Nidhogg could have any influence, right? But once it moves into the three realms of human endeavor, the worlds of materiality, of course, then the whole element of decay enters in, right? And she directly refers that to the halls of misery, which could also be called the halls of ignorance in DK speak, right? Which is Havergomir, the roaring cauldron of human passions. So yeah, a lot of metaphors here. You can see two serpents, right? Down here is Nidhogg or Hog, and then here you have Jormungand, the Ouroboros serpent that represents cyclic time. Anything else? Any other questions before we move on? Okay. So finally, we have on either side of the tree are the primordial giants casting ice and flames into Henunga Gap. The admixture of ice and flames, representing the primordial duality, the original substantive pair of opposites. In Norse mythology, the casting of ice and flames represents the unceasing active forces of chaos, bent on destroying civilization and thus returning all creation to the primordial state represented by Hinunga Gap. The term giants is something of a mistranslation, as some members of the race of Norse giants were the same size as human beings. The Old Norse term was Jutnor, which means devourers. To gain an understanding of why they were thus called, we need to look at a fundamental Norse concept, the duality of Inngord, or Inngord, meaning within the enclosure, and Utangord, meaning beyond the enclosure. Inngord refers to that which is orderly, law-abiding, and civilized. Utangord refers to that which is chaotic and anarchic. Asgard, literally the enclosure of the Aesir gods, is a divine model of the Inngord. Midgård, the world of human civilization, is patterned on Asgard and allied with it. The devourers embody the principle of chaos and are thus Utangord beings par excellence. And as just mentioned, the Jutnor's singular goal is to destroy the civilized Inngord. Ice and flames, the primordial duality, are in this context agents of dissolution into chaos. But then there is, as mentioned earlier, the magicians, the Jotun, whose name has the same root as the Jutnor. In fact, a yutan is a single giant, a yutan is a single yutnor, right? So, but so are also the magicians. So perhaps this is because they can function, the yutans can function in both Inengord and Utengord environments. Since a veiled teaching here having to do with a higher and lower serpent power. Any thoughts or questions?
Yes, Lynn. Sorry.
Go ahead.
Lynn has a question. She says the Erder fountain, would that represent the ether of the solar system?
That's an interesting thought. Since it's the source of vitality, you might have something there. Yeah, I like that. Yeah, especially the words too, somehow, Urdur. Now, I haven't done an etymological search on that word, but yeah, I like that. I like that. Yeah. Being the higher source of the physical realm. Yeah, good, good, good. Anyone else? Any thoughts on anything about this illustration and or text? Okay. Let's conclude our focus on Yggdrasil with this passage from the Secret Doctrine, which also describes the two serpents we were just talking about. Can we get a reader, please?
Okay. Chris, are you going to be an intrepid? Oops. Guess she's not there anymore. Okay. Karen, you want to try your hand at all these wonderful words?
Okay, I will try. The Norse ask the Hesiodic ash tree, whence issued the men of the generation of bronze, the third root race, and the Zeit, would you say Zeit tree of the Polo Vuh, out of which the Mexican third race of men was created, are all one. This may be plainly seen by any reader, but the occult reason why the North Yggdrasil and the Hindu Aswatha, the Godard, the Hellenistic tree of life, and the Tibetan Zampun are one with the Kabbalistic Sephiroidal tree, and even with the holy tree made by Ahura Mazda and the tree of Eden. Who among the Western scholars can tell?
Okay, hold on right there. It's a lot of terms there, but the upshot is simple. She's just saying, basically, all these trees and what their connection is with this Sephirothal, Kabbalistic Sephirothal tree, is there, but who can say what it is, right? Suggesting that all these trees are, that there's an occult relationship to this idea of the Kabbalistic Sephirothal tree, which, has the 10 Sephiroth. So anyway, go ahead, starting with nevertheless. Karen? You there? Somebody?
Oh, okay. Yeah, I was reading on. Nevertheless, nevertheless, the fruits of all those trees, whether Pipala or Haoma, or yet the more prosaic apple, are the plants of life, in fact and verity. The prototypes of all our races were all enclosed in the microscopic tree, which grew and developed within and under the great mundane macrocosmic tree. And the mystery is half revealed in the Dirghot Thomas, where it is said, Pipala, the sweet fruit of the tree upon which come spirits who love the science and where the gods produce all marvels. As the goat guard among the luxuriant branches of all those mundane trees, the serpent dwells. But while the macrocosmic tree is the serpent of eternity and of absolute wisdom itself, those who dwell in the microcosmic tree are the serpents of the manifested wisdom. One is the one and all, the others are its reflected parts. The tree is man himself, of course, and the serpents dwelling in each the conscious manas, the connecting link between spirit and matter, heaven and earth.
Thank you. Good job, Karen. So, yeah, some really important teaching here. You know, the whole idea of the tree as a representation of the three aspects of humanity, right? Who has his head in the clouds, the monadic, all-knowing, all-seeing Vedfulnir, right? With the falcon who sits between the eagle's double eyes, right? All the way down to the roots, which are gnawed by Nighug, the passions, and, you know, the three sources of the three wells being the three sources of these three aspects, basically, right? It's just a fabulous, marvelous, rich, metaphoric teachings. So, any thoughts or questions about this? Yeah,
Yes. Yes. Yeah, I'll get to the hand in just a second. Anne Veronica says in Master DK books, he gives three triangles. The one triangle that is the past shows a straight connection from Shambhala to humanity. You know what we're talking about. There's the past,
right.
The present, and the future. Yeah. And she says the rainbow in that former picture shows just that, the connection between Shambhala and humanity.
Is it an immediate former or, let's see. Yeah, the Bifront, which is runs, yeah, between Asgard and Midgard, or the gods, quote unquote, and humanity, right?
And then Yvonne has a question. So go ahead, Yvonne.
On that first sentence or second sentence, the third root race, out of which the Mexican third race of men was created. So I was just a little confused. Is Mexican a third root race? I thought that was Lemuria.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? This is, I don't remember any other reference, you know, between Mexican and third race. You know, the Shambhala, you know, was on the South American continent, you know, back in those days. So there could be, you know, a connection there. But I didn't do my homework on this in terms of trying to find what that reference is related to, right? Right. Let's see, let's reread the sentence and see if we can get some idea. The Norse ash, which should be ash, I think, the Hesiodic ash tree. Well, maybe it is ask, the Hesiodic ash tree, whence issues the men of the generation of bronze. Okay, so that, you know, places the Norse mythology in the Bronze Age. The third root race and the Zaiti tree of the Popol Vuh, out of which the Mexican third race of men were created, are all one. Okay. I think this is not the same as the third root race of humanity. I think this is a local series of races that are connected with this the Popol Vuh, but I can't really speak to it much more than that. Sorry.
Lynn says the Toltec.
Yeah, it's certainly involved. Yeah. Yeah, it could be that, you know, if you look at those periods, like the Toltec would be one of them, the Maya would probably be one, that you might have, that might be what she's referring to here, right? So you go back to, you know, Quetzalcoatl and the Popol Vuh to determine what this Mexican third race is.
Could it be the third root, not root race, but sub-race of the third root race?
I think that's going too far back. You know, there was no Mexico back then. There wasn't even, I mean, the continents were even different. You know, there'd been, so I think this really brings it into the present, you know, the Mexican third race. I think it localizes it geographically, you know. Politically, of course, it's not relevant. But I think you're looking at, you know, what we were just describing, the Toltec, the Maya. If there's someone here who has specific knowledge of this, please speak up. I see a hand. Maybe they do.
Yeah, it's Yvonne. Go ahead, Yvonne.
No, well, nice try there. I was just thinking Mexico at that time was really part of Atlantis. Right?
You know, see again there, the fact that she's saying Mexican suggests to me that she's not taking it back that far. You know, that's just my opinion. I don't know. So, you know, here we have, you know, she talks about the generation of bronze, to me suggesting the Bronze Age, current Bronze Age, right? Which is, you know, a minute ago compared to Atlantis, right? And then the third root race in Saitichi of Popol Vuh. I don't know. It's like so much of her stuff. You know, you really have to go searching very specifically for all these terms in order to find the connective tissue, right? Anyone else?
Yvonne says thank you, and Patricia says, thanks, this is wonderful information, bringing DK and the secret doctrine and mythology together.
Oh, great. That's the entire purpose of the series right there, is, you know, to infuse the Manly Hall material with, well, maybe a little more of an esoteric slant, as is offered by HPB, DK, and other authors I'm discovering, you know, all the time. Many of them referenced in Manly Hall's works. Okay, anyone else? Okay, let's get back to MPH's text on the Odinic Mysteries. Could we get a reader, please?
Yvonne, can you read that for us, please? You're self-muted.
I was trying to find my little white arrow. Okay. After his death, the historical Odin was apotheosized, his identity being merged into that of the mythological Odin, god of wisdom, whose cult he had promulgated. Odinism was supplanted the worship of Thor, the Thunderer, the supreme deity of the ancient Scandinavian pantheon. The mound where, according to legend, King Odin was buried is still to be seen near the site of his great temple at Uppsala. The 12 Draughters, who presided over the Odinic Mysteries, evidently personified the 12 holy and ineffable names of Odin. The rituals of the Odinic Mysteries were very similar to those of the Greeks, Persians, and Brahmins, after which they were patterned. The Draughters, who symbolized the signs of the zodiac, were the custodians of the arts and sciences, which they revealed to those who passed successfully the ordeals of initiation. Like many other pagan cults, the Odinic Mysteries, as an institution, were destroyed by Christianity, but the underlying cause of their fall was the corruption of the priesthood.
Thank you. Any thoughts or questions? Apotheosize just means to elevate to the rank of a god. Right, so Odin was a man like Buddha, but the culture that followed elevated him to the rank of a god. The belief that Odinism supplanted the worship of Thor is not universally held, as we discover in this quote from Morals and Dogma. In fact, Thor played an essential linking element in the Norse legends. Now, he could have meant that there's, less orientation towards Thor worship compared to before, and it went more to, Odinism. But I think Thor always played a part, especially esoterically. It's a necessary link. Anyway, can we get a reader for this?
Sure, I'll go ahead and read this one. Our northern ancestors worshipped this triune deity: Odin, the Almighty Father; Freya, his wife, emblem of universal matter; and Thor, his son, the mediator. But above all these was the supreme God, the author of everything that existeth, the eternal, the ancient, the living and awful being, the searcher into concealed things, the being that never changeth. Go ahead and tell us how you say his name.
Alfadir.
Alfadir, okay.
Right. Yeah. Thanks. Okay, so here's the mound, where, according to legend, King Udin was buried. And we'll get to the rituals of the mysteries later in this section. So next up, can we get a reader?
Yes. Lynn, can you read that for us, please? You're self-muted. Oops. There you go.
Mythology is nearly always the ritual and the symbolism of a mystery school. Briefly stated, the sacred drama, which formed the basics of the Odinic Mysteries, was as follows. The supreme, invisible creator of all things was called Allfather. His regent in nature was Odin, the one-eyed god. Like Quetzalcoatl, Odin was elevated to the dignity of the supreme deity. According to the Drotars, the universe was fashioned from the body of Ymir, the hoarfrost giant. Ymir was formed from the clouds of mist that rose from Ginnungagap, the great cleft in chaos, into which the primordial frost giants and flame giants had hurled snow and fire. The three gods, Odin, Vili, and Ve, slew Ymir, and from him formed the world. From Ymir's various members, the different parts of nature were fashioned. After Odin had established order, he caused a wonderful palace called Asgard to be built on the top of a mountain, and here the 12 Aesir gods dwelt together, far above the limitations of mortal men. On this mountain also was Valhalla, the palace of the slain, where those who had heroically died fought and feasted day after day. Each night their wounds were healed, and the boar whose flesh they ate renewed itself as rapidly as it was consumed.
Okay, any thoughts or questions about this paragraph or section? As mentioned before, Albert Pike identified the, quote, supreme invisible creator of all things as Alfadir, which he calls the great Scandinavian deity. But it is Godfrey Higgins that gives us a truly esoteric analysis of the upper Scandinavian hierarchy, as well as its relationship to other systems from that era. Could we get an intrepid reader for this one, please?
Harry, will you be our intrepid reader, please?
I'll have a go.
Thank you.
This Odinic doctrine was of very great antiquity and generally received by all the Gothic and Celtic nations. These philosophers thought that the supreme god, Tent or Woden, was the active principle, the soul of the world, which, uniting itself to matter, had thereby put it into a condition to produce intelligences or inferior gods and men. This the poets expressed by saying that Odin espoused Freya, or the lady, by way of eminence. Yet they allowed a great difference between these two principles. The supreme was eternal, whereas matter was his work, and of course had a beginning. All this was expressed by the phrase, "Earth is the daughter and wife of the universal Father." From this mystical union was born the god Thor, Asar Thor, the Lord Thor. He was the firstborn of the Supreme, the greatest of the intelligences that were born of the union of the two principles. The characters given him correspond much with those which the Romans gave to their Jupiter. He too was the thunderer, and to him was devoted the fifth day, Thor's Dag, in German and Dutch, Donderdag, Thunder Day. The common oaths of these people mark the same origin. They swear by Donder and Blexen, thunder and lightning. Friday took its name from Freya, Freya's Dag, as Wednesday did from Woden, Woden's Dag. Thor, being the firstborn, was called the eldest of the sons. He is made a middle divinity, a mediator between God and man. Such too was the Persians' god, for Thor was venerated also as the intelligence that animated the sun and fire. The Persians declared that the most illustrious of all the intelligences was that which they worshipped under the symbol of fire. They called him Mithras, or the mediator god. The Scythians called him Goto Cirrus, the good star. All the Celtic nations were accustomed to worship the sun, either as distinguished from Thor or as his symbol. It was their custom to celebrate a feast at the winter solstice, when that great luminary began to return again to this part of the heavens. They called it Yule, from Heol, Helios, the sun, which to this day signifies the sun in the language of Brittany and Cornwall, whence the French word Noël.
Thanks, Carrie. Nicely read. This
Thank
is
you.
a treasure trove here. You know, we get additional information on Thor. I think, what occurred to me as Carrie was reading is that the difference between Uranus and Jupiter is lightning and thunder. So you have sound, the thunder god, and then you have that more primary lightning of the Uranian, and it's sort of like a first second ray, first second principle idea there going on as well. Interesting.
Francis?
I still think he can be identified with both, but yes. Yeah.
What you said is very similar to what Karsten just typed in. He says, can we say the three gods, Odin, Vili, and Ve, is like Ray 1, 2, 3, or the Father, Son, and the Holy Ghost?
Well, interesting. That's coming up, and it's actually more like 1, 2, and 6. And we'll get there in a minute. And of course, 3 and 6 are strongly related. So yeah, from one point of view, yes.
Okay, and then Karen says, where is the location of the mound where he is buried? You showed us the pictures, but
I don't know, but it'd be easy to pull up. Yeah, it's probably around. See, in the last webinar, we ran across it. The first city in Sweden. God, what was it called? We pulled it up, but yeah, just do a Google search. You'll pull it up.
Carrie says, I'm sorry, I'm going to murder this, Nicholas. Uppsala, Sweden.
Yeah, Uppsala is exactly right. Well murdered. Uppsala, what?
Sweden. That's what he said.
Yeah, in Uppsala, Sweden. Yeah. Well, that's right. I think that was said in this description of where the mounds were, that they were in Uppsala, right?
Oh, sorry. And Lynn asks, relation to Sirius, the good star. It was mentioned in this passage.
Yeah, it's I don't know. Certainly just the Cyrus of it. Of course, that just means star, just like Syria just means stars, Cirrus. So I would say there's a real good chance with that, but I couldn't say definitively, right? The media, Mithras, good chance. Since it's the soul of you could say the soul personality relationship between the Sirius and the solar logos, that the Mithras is a personification, of this mediatorship. It could well be. It's a good chance. Anyone else? Okay. So Freya, or Frigg, is the matter aspect, wife of Udin, but also his daughter, since all creation issues from the spirit aspect. Let's take a closer look. Can we get a reader for this?
Yeah, sure. Martha G, can you read that for us, please? You're self-muted.
And Martha, when you finish that, you can read the next one too. This is quite short.
Okay. Frigga, or Freya, and her handmaids. Next to Odin appears Frigga, the mother of the gods, seated on a throne in Hlidskjalf amongst the Germans. She was looked upon as the same as Freya, the northern Freya, and was worshipped as the all-nourishing Mother Earth.
Okay, and this one?
Frigg, beloved, is the highest ranking of the Esher goddesses. She's the wife of Odin, the leader of the gods. Got something in my way here. Leader of the gods and the mother of Baldur. Like Freya, Frigg is depicted as a Vofa, a Viking Age practitioner of the form of Norse magic known as Cedar. Cedar involved discerning the course of fate and working within its structure to bring about change, often by symbolically weaving new events into being. This power could potentially be put to any use imaginable, and examples that cover virtually the entire range of the human condition can be found in Old Norse literature. In the Old Norse poem Lokasenna, after Loki slanders Frigg, Freya warns him that Frigg knows the fate of all beings, an intimation of her ability to perform Cedar. Frigg's weaving activities are likely an allusion to this role as well. Freya owns falcon plumes that she and the other Aesir use for shape-shifting into that bird, and Frigg possesses her own set of falcon feathers that are used for the same purpose, spinning Cedar. My grandson has a little book called The Child's Introduction to Norse Mythology, and it's really follows this all very closely. So I was looking up trying to find the name of the forger in Norse mythology, and came upon the fact that actually their craftspeople were smelters. They weren't forgers. They were gold makers. And I realized that woven in Norse mythology is also art. Is that while we have animations of good and evil, and certainly of cosmology, they were also interested in how civilization worked, how how the kings were related to the gods in a more humanistic way than the Egyptians did.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I find this has all been sort of fascinating in that this all may have certainly cosmological references, as wonderful scholars in this group have already said, but it did occur to me that there's a much more inclination toward civilization, that if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's that idea of the Innengard and the Utengard, as the depictions of, quote, good and evil, or the giants and the gods. And it's really more about civilization and its protection. And you can imagine in the north how much orientation there had to be on survival and protection, and keeping out the Utengard, that which could destroy your village, your shamans, your leaders, your civilization. Yeah, I found it the same thing, Martha, that the whole arrangement of Yggdrasil and the 9 worlds seems to be oriented and centered around Midgard, which is, the human, instead of the human reality being, in a sense at the bottom, like so often is described in mythical systems, it's in the middle. It's Midgard. It's not, it's not at the bottom of the rung, well, like in Theosophy, for instance, where, you really kind of start, aside from the 8th sphere, but that's doesn't get much press. It's mostly about coming up from the human condition and into the 5th kingdom. But in Norse mythology, you have it in this midway position. It's very fascinating, really is. Yeah, good comments. Any other questions about this? Interesting
Yes.
to me. Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry. Lenore asks, what will be the topic of discussion for December? She says she would like to research the key themes before the meeting.
Oh, that's wonderful. It's easy enough to do. You just go to the next few pages, usually 2 or 3 pages is all, because they're great big pages in the big book of secret teachings. This is, let's see here, we're on, I think, 28 is this page. And so we'll be moving into the next great topic. See, where are we? We're November 1st, right? So we'll be moving into I'm looking for the specific word, the Eleusinian Mysteries, which is another fabulous topic that very popular all around the Mediterranean. In fact, it pretty much displaced all the other schools during its time. It was the Greek mystery school for, along with the Orphic, for hundreds and hundreds of years, right? So that'll be next, depending on how far we get today. But I'm sure that we'll be definitely getting into Eleusis and the Eleusinian mysteries next time.
And Carrie says that he sees mistletoe in this picture. He wants to know if it's from the Druids.
Well, mistletoe has a very, it's actually very important in both cultures, right? If you remember from the Druids, it was sacredly harvested by only the high Druid, who would go up into the trees and harvest. In the Odinic Mysteries, it's sort of it became infamous as being the dart that killed Baldur was made by mistletoe. But interestingly enough, the reason that Loki was able to make this dart is because all the other plants, trees, etc., had been prohibited from harming Baldur. But because mistletoe was considered in such high esteem, they considered it harmless, and it became the kind of Achilles heel of the plant kingdom that it allowed Loki to form a dart and destroy Baldur. Well, we'll actually be getting into that myth a little bit. So they have different but related. I think they were seen as holy in both. There's a lot of interrelation between the Druids and the Odinic Mysteries. Thanks, Carrie. Anyone else? I can't help it. This term vulva, is so interesting. These are feminine magicians, and you think of that the mystery of the vulva, not Volvo, that comes from Scandinavia too, but this idea of the vulva, right, from which issues the hidden, right? So I just can't help but think that there's some connection there. Okay, let's get back to the text. Next, MPH cites the myth of the hoarfrost giant Ymir. Since Ymir represents a pivotal concept in Norse as well as theosophical doctrine, let's take an in-depth look. Could we get a reader, please?
Yes, Scott, can you read that for us, please?
Ymir, Screamer, is a hermaphroditic god, a giant, and the first creature to come into being in the Norse creation myth. As the first giant, he's the ancestor of all the other giants. And since almost all the gods are partially descended from giants, he's their ancestor as well. Ymir was born when fire from Muspelheim and ice from Niflheim met in the abyss of Ginnungagap. Ymir was suckled by the cow Audhumla for his nourishment. When he slept, several other gods, or giants rather, were conceived asexually in Ymir's hermaphroditic body and spontaneously sprang from his legs and the sweat from his armpits. Audhumla received her nourishment from a salt lick, and as she licked, a being named Buri, the first of the Icer gods, was freed from within the salt. He produced a son, Bor, who mated with Bestla, one of Ymir's descendants. From their union came Odin, the chief of the Icer, and his brothers, Vili and Ve. Divine brothers then slew Ymir and fashioned the cosmos from his corpse. As one of the poems in the poetic Edda, Grimnismal, or Song of the Hooded One, words it, from Ymir's flesh the earth was created, and from his sweat, or in some versions blood, the sea, mountains from bone, trees from hair, and from his skull the sky. From his eyebrows the blithe gods made Midgard, home of the sons of men, and from his brains they sculpted the grim clouds.
Thanks, Scott. And another reader, please.
Okay, Martha, let me make sure. Okay, you're self-muted. Can you unmute yourself? There you go.
Martha S., right?
Yes.
Ymir is the personification of the chaos before creation, the impersonal void of Ginnungagap. Ymir and Ginnungagap are metaphors for limitless potential before creation. It is a no-thingness. The primal matter is Ymir's body, which the gods tear apart to craft the elements. It's fitting for Ymir to be the progenitor of the giants, for in Norse myth, giants are the forces of formless chaos, who threaten to corrupt and overturn the gods' created order. But the giants are more than just forces of destruction. In the words of medievalist Margaret Clunies Ross, the gods covet important natural resources which the giants own, then steal them and turn them to their own advantage by utilizing them to create culture. That is, they put the giants' raw materials to work for themselves. These raw materials are of diverse kinds and include intellectual capital, such as the ability to brew ale, as well as the cauldron in which it is made, and abstractions made concrete, like the mead of poetry and the runes of wisdom.
Thank you, Martha. And a new reader?
Okay, Michael, can you read that for us, please?
Ymir's name provides an additional and rather poetic instantiation to be represented by an actual example of this role as the personification of primordial chaos. Recall that Ymir's name means screamer, from the Old Norse verb mjamja, to scream. The scream, the wordless voice, is the raw material from which words are made. By taking formless matter, represented by Ymir's body, and giving it form, the gods were, metaphorically speaking, making words out of a scream. The metaphor is completed by the description of the act of creation in the Old Norse poem Völuspá. There, the verb used for the action by which the gods create the world is yipa, which has a range of meanings: lift, raise, bring up, come into being, proclaim, reveal. The primary sense in which yipa should be understood here is to come into being, but note the additional shade of to proclaim. Given the poetic symmetry with Ymir's name, this is surely not coincidental. The gods proclaimed the world into being as they sculpted out of the screamer's corpse.
Thank you, Michael. I love that last sentence. The gods proclaim the world into being. That's very much the purpose of logos, right? Through the bridge of sound, they proclaim the world into being. And then we have the Norse take, which is they sculpt it out of the screamer's corpse. Gotta love it. Okay, let's see. Any thoughts and questions on what's come so far? The theosophical parallels are pretty clear. Hinunga gap is primordial space, and Ymir is a personification of the source of raw material for all creation. Could we get a reader for this HPB quote?
Carrie, can you read that for us, please?
Before the warm rays pouring from the home of brightness awake life in the great waters of space. The elements of the first creation come into view, and from them is formed the giant Ymir, also Orgelmir, primordial matter differentiated from chaos, literally seething clay. The Ases create the earth, the seas, the sky, and the clouds, the whole visible world, from the remains of the slain giant Ymir.
Thanks, Carrie. So, Ipa, or as Michael says, Yipa, I think it's the root of yippee, right? Is the Norse version of the creative word. And could this spontaneous springing forth from sweat be a reference to the sweat-born, the theosophical second root race, who are also giants, but amorphous beings? Seems like a strong connection there. So next, let's take a look at Odin's brothers Vili and Ve, who help him to create the cosmos. Can we get a reader for this?
Joe, can you read that for us, please?
Certainly. The most compelling information about Vili and Ve may be found in their names. In Old Norse, Vili means will, and Ve means temple, and is etymologically closely related to other words that have to do with the sacred, and hallowing in particular. Odin, Vili, and Ve, respectively, inspiration, conscious intention, and the sacred, are the three basic forces or characteristics that distinguish any cosmos from chaos. Hence, it was these three gods who originally fashioned the cosmos and surely remained three of the most necessary pillars of its continued upkeep and prosperity.
Thank you, Joe. So we could hypothesize that the first, second, and sixth rays are personified by this trinity. And also it's possible that it's the third ray, which DK tells us in terms of 1, 2, and 6, DK tells us are always part of the constitution of major avatars. You know, Christ, Buddha, and Hercules all had first, second, and sixth ray constitutions. Thus, it can be seen as three aspects of Alphadir, especially because Udan is involved in the triune, right? So they can be seen as three aspects of Alphadir. Next, the god realm Asgard literally means enclosure of the Aesir. And could we get a reader for this, please?
Yes, Yvonne, can you read that for us, please?
Yes. Over the earth also, but higher than the home of the light elves, the gods founded their strong kingdom of Asgard, which shone with gold and precious stones, and where eternal spring reigned. The broad river, Ifing, divided the home of the gods from that of the Jotuns, but was not sufficient protection against the incursions of the giants, who were learned in magic. The gods built themselves castles in Asgard and halls that shone with gold. It is recorded that there were 12 such heavenly palaces, but the poems differ from each other in describing them. High above Asgard, as Lidskiof swaying gate, the throne of Odin, whence the all-ruling Father looked down upon the worlds and watched the doings of men, elves, and giants. It is enough to say here regarding the mythological signification of these heavenly castles that it is very probable that they were meant for the 12 constellations of the zodiac. According to this hypothesis, the deities who possessed these 12 palaces were gods of the months. For instance, Uller, who lived at Yadadler, was the god of archery and used to glide over the silvery iceways on skates. He ruled in his quality of protector of the chase when the sun passed over the constellation of Sagittarius in winter.
Thank you. And thoughts or questions about this? So right here where you have this ellipsis, there was a description of all the other 11 castles that are built in Asgard, right? So it really gets into, it's interesting, you know, but it was a little much. So I just cut to the chase here. Okay, next up, on the slopes of the same mountain that Asgard crowns is Valhalla, which means Hall of the Slain. We get a reader about, actually, you know what? We're going to make this our stopping point. We'll start with Valhalla on our next webinar, finish up this section on Odinic Mysteries and start in on the Eleusinian Mysteries. So before I forget, just in 15 minutes, Michael Robbins is offering a special webinar that has to do with the U.S. election that's coming in 2 days.
Francis.
And yeah.
Sorry, there's actually going to be two. There's going to be one in just a few minutes, and then there will be one tomorrow at 3:30 p.m. And I put the link in the chat box to go to the announcement on our public Moira Federation, where it has the direct link to attend both of those events. So,
great.
So that's in the chat box to everybody if you're interested in attending either one of those events.
Great. Okay, and our next Secret Teachings webinar will be, I assume, the first Sunday of December. And
yes.
What is that date?
The 6th of December at 8 p.m.
So we'll have a 5-week before that.
And then the Secret Doctrine one will be on the 15th of November at 8 p.m.
Oh yeah, the next one, right?
Right,
yeah.
Right.
Yeah, just 2 weeks as normal, and then 3 weeks following that for the Secret Teachings. And then there's a bit of a jumble, I think, for the Secret Doctrine webinar in mid-December, but we'll deal with that next time. Okay, any other business? I think that does it.
Yep, I think that does it for now.
Okay, I'll let you go so you can sign on to Michael's webinar if you're so inclined. It's always a privilege to host these webinars. I really get a lot out of them. I hope you are too. And until our Secret Doctrine in mid-November, we'll see you at that time. Okay, bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.